Welcome to A Growing Concern. We're going to talk with Maxine Fookson and Marco Mejia about various things. It is a coalition, so there's lots of folks, lots of different groups that are involved in it. So we'll just get right to it here. We're going to open up the phones in a little while if folks want to call up and ask questions or comment. But Maxine, I hadn't met Maxine. I had met Marco out in the streets videotaping and doing different things out with some of the different events that are going on. But I want to thank Jamie Partridge for putting together the phone numbers and the people involved. I'm going to have somebody on next week there's a laundry labor dispute going on with a laundry here in town. You know the name of that by any chance? I didn't write it down, no. But you'll tune in next week and then you'll learn about it, because we're going to have a talk about that. But the Immigrant Rights Coalition, Maxine, what exactly is it? I think you say you had a mission statement there.
Yeah. Well, I can just share what we have about us on Facebook. So it's Portland Immigrant Rights Coalition, or PIRC, as we call ourselves.
Oh, okay.
So the mission is founded in 2006. PIRC is a coalition of immigrant rights and social justice organizations united in the mission of bringing an end to unjust detention and deportation of immigrant family members in our Oregon communities. We are committed to maintain vigil over and end the collaboration between law enforcement agencies and ICE offices and officials aimed at targeting our communities in public spaces and within the justice system.
That'll keep you busy.
I think so, especially now.
Oh, yeah.
Especially now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, I know that Portland's been going around and around with the Portland Police Department being involved with the PJTTF,
Yes.
the
And
federal.
we're involved with that.
And then now there's also their involvement with ICE, and they refused to do that, and then they joined in, and now I know that Dan Handelman with the Portland
Cop
Watch is trying to get that pulled out of there. I don't know if he's going to have much luck, but
Yeah.
I hope that he does.
Yeah.
But
And PIRC is part of that coalition that Dan has pulled together.
Oh, okay.
And, one of the federal agencies that's part of the Joint Terrorism Task Force is ICE. So it really directly involves surveillance of immigrants, as well as, the FBI surveillance of communities of color, particularly Muslim communities and South Asian communities.
Sure. Well, you mentioned, we haven't really mentioned all the names, did we, or did we?
No, of the people in PIRC?
The different,
Yeah, should I go down it?
Yeah, go down the list, because I know that he's on it, and we'll go to
Oh,
him.
yeah,
We'll
yeah.
go to Marco next
Okay.
to talk about his group.
Yeah, okay, I'll just kind of go down the list and we can tell you a little about the groups we're in. So the members of PIRC are VOS, Workers' Rights Education Project, American Friends Service Committee, or AFSC, the Migrant Collective, Colectiva de Migrantes, Portland Jobs with Justice, the Interfaith Movement for Immigrant Justice, or Emerge, Unite Oregon, Northwest Workers Justice Project, Enlace, Jewish Voice for Peace and the Network Against Racism and Islamophobia, Momentum Alliance, Latino Network, Oregon Immigrant Activist, Gabriela Portland, and Portland Committee for Human Rights in the Philippines.
Mm-hmm. So I noticed that, how many groups does there a count?
Oh, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Quite
6,
a
7,
few.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. About 13, and I think, I'm not even sure if this is totally up to date. It seems like more people are starting to become, interested in joining on.
Yeah, exactly. So there's also a number of groups and organizations that are collaborating and working together. They're not members, but we really work together, and
I'm sure, like Veterans for Peace.
Connected to migrant rights issues, which are connected to everything else. So we're connected to the overall social justice and the movement here in Portland.
Mm-hmm. And you were, you mentioned he was one of those groups. Is like you the spokesperson for it, or?
Yeah. So we have PIRC has different working groups that helps us to coordinate ourselves and do the work that we do. And one of them is the communications, and we do have a team of people that are spokespeople, and I'm a member of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what was the name of the group that you were with, though?
So I belong to the Interfaith Movement for Immigrant Justice.
Oh, the Interfaith.
But also, yeah, I am a member is the kind of person that have different hats. Even though I don't use a hat usually, I never have a but I do. So I've been working and supporting both the Workers' Rights Education Project, also, and a member of the Migrant Collective. Yeah,
That was the one, yeah.
Yeah, which is a group of immigrants that are interested in the community and supporting, the work that PIRC and other migrant rights organizations are doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, so how does the Migrant Coalition differ from VOS, say?
So, as I mentioned, the Migrant Collective is a collective of activists and people that, especially in the overall, are migrants. That we are first generation or second generation, even migrants that are working or active in different ways, in different organizations and groups. That is a space for us to come together and to share and to see how we can help to improve the work that we do, in our organizations and our activism and our own, organizations or places that we are contributing or supporting.
Well, it seems like you have collectives within coalitions then.
Yeah,
which is it's good. I mean, it breaks things up into pieces where things can be worked on. It would seem like to me, because there's so many different aspects of this.
It seems like one of the important aspects of PIRC, I think, is the power of the groups that are in the coalition, and the fact that we're really very grassroots. So we're all volunteers. Our PIRC work is for some people part of their work with other social justice groups, but the PIRC aspect is volunteer. And as a non-immigrant, a third generation person, I feel like one of the things about PIRC is the attempt to be very immigrant-led and to be really at the grassroots and working from what we hear from immigrant communities in terms of what they need, what the needs are.
Sure.
And to walk, beside them, to be led by immigrants in terms of what actions are important, what policies are important, and then to be good allies.
Sure, and how you phrase things too. That has to be done in such a way that sometimes that's the actual language of things is the most important part. So, well, one thing I was struck with was I expected it to be a lot of immigrant-oriented organizations, but I heard at least one or two religious, the Jewish and the Interfaith that you mentioned that you were a part of. And so are these groups just there to support? Are they actively working like the Interfaith?
Yeah, actively working. So the Interfaith Movement for Immigrant Justice, or Emerge, started out as the sanctuary movement, really. So when sanctuary was first introduced, the idea of safe spaces like churches, temples, places where people could find safety from being deported, that was originally, it was called the sanctuary movement, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I
So
remember
then
that.
they became
from the 80s.
right in
Yeah.
the 80s, exactly. So they later the name changed to Emerge. I don't know exactly
Yes.
when.
It's about 3 years, I think.
3 years ago. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So now Emerge is in the statewide, really developing one of the strongest networks around the concept of sanctuary, not just being a physical space, because it's not what we're being asked to do. Again, the response is, what's the ask? And it's not so many people that need to go into churches for physical sanctuary. So Emerge is really involved in the aspect of creating safe places, like Oregon being a sanctuary state, Portland being a sanctuary city, and really what does that mean? And so they work with different faith groups to develop congregational readiness to support immigrants in all kinds of ways.
And that would probably be the same too for the Jewish.
Yeah, so I'm part of Jewish Voice for Peace's network against racism and Islamophobia. And it's a specific network. Jewish Voice for Peace primarily is came into being around justice in Palestine, and as a social justice group is very interested and concerned and really works from a framework of intersectional work.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see a lot of relationships in all the different movements So the Network Against Racism and Islamophobia works specifically to combat Islamophobia and all kinds of racism, with a focus on Islamophobia because it's such a critically important issue right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, it would seem to me that all of this against, whether it's Islamophobia or immigrant rights or whatever, that it's all standing up for the Constitution.
Yeah.
And that is something that the folks who are worried about their jobs, or for all the myriad of reasons why people are upset about the immigration, they just don't get that part of it. It seems like to me, and I'm really happy to hear so many different groups with so many different perspectives, but they're all going down the same road. Mm-hmm. And that to me is I didn't expect that coalition would be so broad, and I'm really glad to hear that it is, because considering the situation with our government, if you want to call it a government, with the Trump administration, you need all the help you can get. It seems like.
Yeah, it seems too that, I mean, that's, I think, is an important thing to talk about. What we've been seeing and what we've been hearing over the last 6 months has been
since the election,
yeah,
basically, and gaining ground
since,
too.
Yeah, since January. So I mean, that might be important to just talk about what's happening in Portland and in our whole state, really. ICE on steroids, really, in terms of daily picking people up. It's not the big raids on workplaces, although that sometimes happens. But we are aware of every single day people getting picked up in front of courthouses, or when they're on their way to work, walking to their car.
I think going to the kids at school, I think I read one time too. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned some videos, and we weren't really able to use those, but are they on your website?
Well, we don't have a website. They're on our Facebook page,
which
is what
page.
Yeah.
To me, they're interchangeable anymore.
Yes,
so.
They are both there. Yeah, one that was put up by the ACLU at the Washington County Courthouse, which has been a place where, particularly on Mondays, when people come in for their DUI court proceedings, ICE is there waiting to pick people up. And there's been a lot of concern, and we have legal observers that many of us are trained to do that. That's part of what we do through PIRC. And so we're at the courthouse, and on this one particular Monday, we happen to have been there doing a vigil at the same time that ICE agents, without any warrant or due process or whatever, kind of circled around this couple coming out of the courthouse and had a case of mistaken identity, asked a U.S. citizen man to present his ID, and harassed him and his wife. And it turned out that he wasn't the person they were looking for. They're dressed in plain clothes, in blue jeans and sweatshirts, and their cars are not clearly marked. So it's very scary. People don't know. The wife is saying, "Who are you? Why are you, on this video? Why are you asking for his ID? What right do you have to do this?" And the right that they feel like they have is because they can do it. They've been given this kind of impunity to do it.
Well, ever since Homeland Security came in, it seems like that sort of thing has gotten that way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, Marco, you look like you were ready to say something.
Yeah, I like to put a little perspective in all of this, because I think that for many people it's very pragmatic, to see people violating the law. But when we are talking about our mission is actually, our work is to fight against unjust policies, and not just policies, but unjust, the injustice that is happening with all these sentiments, of anti-immigrant, anti-refugees, anti-Muslims, pretty much everyone that is not white, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I'm saying that because I think that the perspective that we need to think about is not only think about what this, the surface is out there at this moment, but what historically has been leading to it, right? So we at PIRC, are trying to educate also people about the root causes of migration, right? Because people don't think about why these immigrants are here, why these refugees are coming to this country.
They just want a free ride.
Exactly,
You know,
and they like to go do tourism around the world, right? Because
Yeah.
so actually, you know, the United States is the biggest example of how historically injustices have been, you know, committed to people and peoples in the world, right? And it's not just only the United States. It's other countries, especially the European white countries that went out, you know, in a rampant, you know, takeover of lands and colonize the world pretty much. And let's remember that this country here that we have it today was a takeover of the lands of people that were already here in one hand, and in the other hand, they brought people, forcing, you know, capturing people from the African continent to force them in and get them here to be slave labor. So that's when things should be starting in terms of analyzing why people are here in this country. Some people, not because they want to come, they never wanted to come here, they were forced to come. And nowadays things have changed. So slavery doesn't exist, right? But there's these subtle ways of how slavery and how the economy it's running this world in this country, and how slavery is, you know, subtle, and it's behind a lot of different, you know, situations. And we were talking before about, you know, the trade agreements, the free trade agreements,
what I was
right?
going to bring up next.
Which is the free for the rich and free for the corporations to do whatever they want, and free for those countries that dominated to do whatever they want. That's the free trade agreement. It's not an equal trade,
It's not,
by the
not
way.
fair.
No, it's not fair.
No.
It's that kind of thing. It's kind of submitting, slaving other countries to whatever this group of dominant countries and economies want to do in the world. So what they are doing and have been doing in other countries have been creating the conditions for people to actually have to run out of those countries because they need to defend their lives, their families, etc., etc., etc. The most common, you know, like let's say an example now that was how many years was the North American Free Trade Agreement that happened? It's been 25 years.
Wow.
That's
A lot of
I think
years,
it was
yeah.
92.
94. It was 94.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah. So it's getting
anyway,
up there.
it's getting up there, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so in that case, you know, what happened is that when the North American Free Trade Agreement happened, the corporations in the United States, you know, made it happen. Let's say the corn. That's one of the biggest things that happened, right?
Right.
The corn. The U.S. The trade agreement says none of the countries can subsidize anything, but the United States did it. They subsidized the corn industry. They come into the Mexican market. They destroy the market, the corn market. They destroy the production of corn in Mexico with cheap corn from the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So they take over, they destroyed, and there's millions of farmers without jobs. Thousands of farmers, you know, I'm talking about from the farmer that has, you know, that's working on the ground, you know, planting and harvesting, to the farmer, you know, that is, you know, administrating the small owner, etc. All of them lost it.
And they
right?
might have had that in their family for generations.
Yeah, so millions of families that don't have a job, don't have where to get a job, because there's no jobs, there's unemployment in Mexico, there's poverty, there's other conditions that are difficult that are happening, that we cannot blame the people, right?
Violence.
Violence, etc., etc. So that people have to look, and those families have to look for a place where they can call home, where they can take their kids, you know, to school so they can grow up and be somebody, you know, have a future. So that's just one little example in how things have happened, and people don't understand that there is a reason why immigrants are here. And actually, those reasons are the consequences of the interests and the economic interests of the United States and other big nations and corporations. Mm-hmm. Those are the ones that are causing this. So the migrants, we have been, you know, the victims of the system. Because we need to look for a place to, you know, where I'm not going to be killed because any reason, because I'm not going to lose my land and my jobs, because I'm not going to lose, you know, the country. Even some countries like in Africa, you know, have been taken over to exploit the metals to produce these things that we use,
Yeah, the
cell
silica.
phones,
Yeah.
right? And nobody talks about that. So where is these people going to go? And I'm not talking about 100, 1,000 people. We're talking about millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people, and including, that the domination and the control has been happening through local governments. So those governments are helping to enforce what these corporations are doing, right? So they, cause violence and death to those peoples, in those countries, and they need to flee. We're talking about the 80s, right? The wars in Central America.
Central America.
Right.
Yeah.
Nicaragua and
Nicaragua.
Guatemala.
Yeah, exactly. So the United States was one of the promoters of that war, was financing the war, was pushing the war through, because the corporations that were, that wanted the lands to have a free, how do you call it, free to do whatever, right? It's the freedom. It's that kind of freedom.
Free
It's not a real
yeah.
freedom, right? So the people in those countries, they didn't want them to come and destroy and exploit and perpetuate, the poverty of those countries at the same time that they are exploiting the land, planting their bananas and their fruits, and like the United Fruit Company is one of the biggest one those years, because that the wars are happening, because people are opposing to be exploited, to be robbed, to have their land being destroyed. So they wanted to come to the United States, and the government didn't let them come into the United States. They didn't allow the Central Americans to have refugee status, people that were persecuted, to be killed, etc., people that lost their land, etc. So the sanctuary movement with people here in the United States, people of faith and communities and congregations and grassroots organizations, they organized and said, we cannot stand, without doing anything when we see that the foreign policy of the United States and what's happening, and now when they come in here, they are not allowing even the people to come to do something, and they created a sanctuary movement. So they actually help people to bring into the United States and offer a place to live, in churches and homes, etc. And that was, if you want to call it, like breaking unjust laws, because the United States didn't allow people to come in. But at the end, they forced them to recognize that war has been created by the United States, and that they need to allow the people to come, and we cannot stop them to come, because they're in danger of death and all of that stuff. So that's what happened. So anyway, my overall point is that those are just little examples in what is happening and why people have to migrate. Now with this thing about the destruction of the environment, it's been created by people. It's been created by us, like using cars and not thinking cell phones and not thinking about all the garbage that we produce and where is that going, all of that stuff. But especially those that have created a system to make us feel, and consumeristic, and that we need those things, and they make money out of it, right? Because that's what they want. That's the system is called capitalist, because the capital has to be there. Is the most important thing, is the God of the system, right? So we need to think about those things, when we're talking about immigrants and why we are here. So I understand that everything that's happening out there, it's more like use and manipulation of us and the situations to be used for political ends. Like in this administration, by the way, I wanted to mention that it's only when Trump won the presidency, right, that things started happening like that. No, it happened already before. So let's be very clear, with Obama and the ones before. That has been always, and using migrants and refugees, and people of color as the guinea pigs to blame us of all the problems.
Scapegoats.
It's scapegoating us and all of that stuff. And we need to stop that. So in order to do that, the people have to be educated. A lot of people that don't agree with us or with what I'm saying, if they want to challenge me, I will ask, the audience to go and research and learn about history and learn about the cause, the root causes of everything. And they will start learning what happened. They need to ask why they're here. The people that are telling us that we need to go back. It's like, you came also from somewhere and took, and your great grandparents came and took over the land and robbed the land from the real people, the native people that live here. And why they came here? Many of those, from white communities and countries in Europe came here is because they had wars, they had poverty,
religious persecution,
etc., etc. The same reasons that continue happening. But now, as the United States are provoking those conditions, the reasons that why they came, but in these other countries. And then they deny the right of these people to go and look for a place where they can live,
right?
Safe.
Well, capital can move across borders, but people can't.
Exactly, with the free trade agreements, right? Yeah. So, I'm sorry it took a lot of time, but it's important for people to understand.
You laid it out there pretty clear.
Why things are happening, right? And as Maxine was saying, and you were saying, it's, right now we live in a very radical situation where from many years, the right wing and the white nationalists and the neo-Nazis have been kind of preparing and working together until they finally got one of them in the presidency, right? And now they have a free will to get out there in the name of free expression and promote hate and tell and say and act upon that. And that's what we are living now in.
Well, and then he appoints people like Jeff Sessions, who this is what he's been wanting to do all
Racist.
along.
Yeah.
Well,
and the people that we've seen come and go, like Bannon and, his type, Gaffney. I think the other part that when you take the history that Marco was just saying and what's real and you add on to it a media that really encourages people to not think, to not know the history, to not ask the critical questions, to not...
Or selective history, anyway.
Very selective history, yeah. And, there's not... Our populace is just so unaware of the whole colonizing, way that we've been, and I think that, that just perpetuates the injustices that are happening.
I think a lot of people are aware of it. They know about Native Americans, they know about the slave trade, they know about the Civil War, but they just disregard it. They don't factor it in to the present circumstance when actually it's a spectrum, it's a range that goes on. Like you mentioned, I remember you mentioned bananas, and I had written down here that we did, I think it was sugar in Hawaii where we took over them, and it was the Chiquita banana, I believe, was in some of those countries too as well.
Pineapple.
But you go further back, pineapple. You go further back, cotton. They did the same thing in this country, and in the 1600s and 1700s, they built empires on cotton with black slave labor, and it ended up almost tearing this country apart. And maybe we're coming back around to somewhat the same dynamic now. With the hate against immigrants of any kind, because it isn't even white in some ways, because they didn't even consider Irish human at one time.
Right.
And you can't get much whiter
Italians.
than that.
Right.
So
and look who
it's a designation. It's not necessarily a reality.
Exactly. And I think look at what's being fueled from the top now. I mean, I think what Marco says is really true, that this didn't just start with Trump, but it's really so accelerated to an extreme right now. Donald Trump tweets his Islamophobic tweets this week, and who responds? David Duke. The Ku Klux Klan writes back and says, "Great tweets. We love you, Donald Trump." So,
but you don't have to say you like us.
Yeah, right. He's fueled. His base is small, but they are powerful, and they, So I think this is a time we really have to fight back.
Well,
that's why I think that going back to PIRC, right? And it's that's why we exist. And as you see, there's a number of different groups and organizations that we are actually working, and it's a mix, very diverse, spectrum of groups and ethnic backgrounds and activities and social justice issues that people are working on, etc., that are focusing on this issue and the migrant justice, but also connected to the other ones too. So for us, it's very important to continue doing the work in terms of educating the community. And I can say, we don't want to blame people that that will say what you are saying, right? That they don't want to recognize or admit that they come from the same kind of history, but now you're kind of like, it's like the Israel in Palestine, right? Yeah, the Jewish were, exterminated and killed in Germany, and now that's what they're doing with the Palestinians nowadays.
It just
So
doesn't make
it's
sense.
outrageous, right? It doesn't make sense, exactly.
Absolutely.
And so it's how do we, educate our communities from the point of view that I'm not going to blame you, I'm not going to tell you you're so wrong, but let's start, the education starts with let's have a dialogue here, and a human dialogue, not just this one about kind of I put my theory here and you will defend each other's and mine is right and you're wrong. It's more like how we humanize that dialogue in order to understand that many groups talk. It's like, hey, we have kids, right? We want the best for you want the best for your kids or for my kids, right? That's very important. Let's start with that point of view. And it happens that I'm a migrant or you are a migrant or you are Jewish or you are this or that. Does it change that we want a big important good future for our kids? Yes, right. So
we
we start thinking differently instead of always going, to the demonizing and dehumanizing of groups, right? So for us, for PIRC, it's very important to do that education, but also we have the other part, as I mentioned before, that we do work in a number of different things, and Maxine can help us to explain a little bit. I've been talking a lot. But one of the things that we do is, as our mission is explaining, is to work against injustices, especially for migrants, that are happening to migrants, and the injustices are coming from different areas, right? And some of those are our unjust laws that we have. That's why Homeland Security exists, and that's what happened after September 11. And all of these anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant policies, and not even policies, just how do you call it? They create a culture of it, right?
Beliefs
that is promoting, and as we were talking before, like ICE and the things that they do, many of those things are not law. They're not legally bounded by law. They're just asking police here and there, other groups and local governments to do things.
And if they don't,
and they cannot tell them, it's like, I come here and I give an order to you, hey, do this.
and they could stand up, but they don't.
And they can
I
stand
think
up.
they may in San
Exactly.
Francisco. There are places
and
that
different
they
places
do. Yeah.
have done it. Here in Portland, finally, that happened. What we did work in a big, long campaign to stop the collaboration between the local enforcement and ICE and the ICE police. And that is very important for us because, we have the local law enforcement and we have the local justice system that deals with everything that we do or don't do and with crime or with anything that needs to be dealt with, right? But then we have this other system that comes from Homeland Security, from ICE, that wants to override and to take over this other justice system that we already have, or unjust system that we have. Parts of it is unjust too. But so it's that kind of thing that's happening right now, right? And that is not right. I mean, it's very, even for the local police and the law enforcement, it's difficult, and many of them, they know it because people have lost the trust in the police because that collaboration, right? Because that confusion that's happening. So we have been working around, stopping that collaboration so that people really trust the police for whatever the work that they do locally. And also we keep these other, ICE and the Homeland Security out of our communities. We're not saying that they cannot do the work. If they have, some cases of migrants like anyone else, we're not
Breaking the law,
opposing anything. There's a law that deals with them. There's a law that deals with me if I drive without a license, right? An ID or anything. So I need to deal with it, but not with the other one. So anyway, so we've been working on that with groups and communities, understanding that, so that we keep a safe space, at least, in our city, in our state, for people to be able to trust the police, and to, if there's a crime happening, if I see something going on, that I can call the police and say, hey, and collaborate with that and help, for the police to do their work.
For safety.
In safety, you know, for families, for neighborhoods, for anything. But because this ingredient of the ICE coming into our communities and trying to push the local police to collaborate, that destroys that trust, and actually that creates even more panic and fear in our communities.
I think that ties into some of the legislation that we can maybe talk about that PIRC is
I'm glad you
working
brought that up,
against.
right.
And you know, I think what Marco talks about as in terms of the fear, when we know when there's policing that's based on fear, when there's this collaboration, be it with the FBI, with ICE, or whatever, it really doesn't make, you know, they claim it makes our communities safer. It protects us from terrorism or
The program
bad
is called
guys.
Safe Communities.
Yeah, right, safe communities. But you know, it's really the opposite. It's very much
Exactly.
not that way, because people don't feel safe. If you're somebody who's here without documentation and you see a crime going on, you're not going to call the police if you know that they're going to report your status to ICE. So, you know, Oregon has had on the books really now for like 30 years a sanctuary law. And, you know, it has a lot of holes in it, a lot of things we wish were much stronger, but basically what it says about our state is that local and state resources cannot be used to help immigration enforce their immigration laws, to do their immigration
So
work.
that's the state
Sanctuary
ordinance
law.
or whatever.
Right, exactly.
Isn't the statute of the Constitution of the...
It's
I
an
don't think
Oregon
I didn't
law.
know that.
Yeah, so it's the Oregon Sanctuary Law, is what it's called. And
It's now what we call it that way, yeah.
we call it that
Yeah.
now, as sanctuary is kind of taking that concept of we have a safe state or a safe city. And so basically it's saying we want to allocate our resources for what they need to do to keep our communities safe from crime, or for social service agencies to be able to do the work of social service agencies, of state departments. We're not here to do ICE's work, Homeland Security's work. And so it's been a really important law on our books. So there is a very anti-immigrant group, Oregonians for Immigration Reform, OFER. They were
I
the
have a
people.
new name for them.
Oh yeah,
Offer means Oregonians for Institutionalized Racism.
there you go.
Yeah,
That's what they are. Yes.
for real.
That is exactly what they are. They're very xenophobic. They're very racist. They are the people that brought us the, you know, taking away driver's licenses, driver's cards. They get money from right-wing groups, from white supremacist groups,
Probably
from outside the
probably
state.
nationally
From outside the state, exactly. So they are in the process now of collecting names to put an initiative on the ballot. It's called IP22, and it would revoke that state sanctuary law. So it would be on the ballot in November, like a year from now, November 2018. It will be on our ballot.
If they can get the signatures.
If they can get the signatures,
I don't
right.
doubt they
so they're
will.
already in the gathering stage. They need to get 80, 90,000 signatures, something
Oh,
like
they're
that.
going to do that, no problem.
So, yeah, so that's one of the things coming up that all of us will be strongly working on, is to oppose initiative petition IP22.
So you will
And
be
that's really-
opposing not the collecting of the signatures, but opposing the actual when it comes to
Right.
vote.
I think at this point, really the work that we have to do is educate people.
Yeah.
That it's the signature gathering is just going to happen. I don't know that there's a way to block that. I mean, I think certainly challenging, do they actually have legitimate signatures? I'm sure that there's going to be a number of challenges to that. But at this point, really the importance of educating people just to the fact that we don't want our state and our local resources, which are already so strapped to just do the work that they need to do. Why should they be doing immigration's work? And so we don't want that collaboration to happen, as we were saying, because it does nothing for the safety and the well-being of our communities.
Well, I think that the main thing we need to do is, well, actually, while they collect the signatures, they will be educating people that law is on the books.
Absolutely.
So maybe it'll
Yeah.
backfire on them.
Yeah.
Because they're doing your work for you, but they won't have any trouble collecting 80 or 90,000 signatures, I don't think. So it's going to be.
I mean, they've gotten stuff on the ballot before, so we have to hope that people will realize that this is a law on the books for a good reason, because we have agencies be it the police department, health departments, schools, whatever, that need to use their resources appropriately and don't need to start doing
Have you developed
investigations for ICE.
Have you
So
developed any strategies yet? 'Cause it
Um,
is a year away, but
maybe,
that
yeah.
goes quick.
statewide,
so-
there's a group.
So
yeah.
there's a coalition that is called Oregon Ready that is actually doing statewide work supporting immigrant rights and migrant rights.
Oregon Ready.
Oregon Ready, yeah, it was just launched this month, last past month in November. But it's a coalition that has been working together, to support immigrants. It was to support, DACA and DAPA if it was going to happen. The parents and the kids.
Well, that
and
was a
those
60
families.
days, and that 60 days is going to be up for
Yeah,
too
so
long.
that's the
Yeah.
other issue
Yeah,
we can talk
exactly.
about is a
Yeah,
clean
so
green belt.
so this coalition is so we are PIRC is a member of this other coalition that has other groups and organizations in Portland and around the state
Kind of goes like
that
this,
are
coalition,
working
coalition.
together. And,
Sounds that way.
And that's right. Well, we need to be like the
Yeah,
tree, right? Like the
right.
branches, like
Exactly.
all of us connected and the branches and working together to get the fruits.
Like all the roots
Yeah.
under the ground you don't
Yeah.
see.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So that coalition is very active right now in developing a strategy of doing that we're talking about. The education, the part of opposing. If it happens, the ballot measure, but trying to stop it initially. I don't know if there's already some documents or materials, but it's in the works.
Everything's. Yeah.
So does this Oregon Ready have a Facebook page and a way people can get into
This moment I'm not aware
it
of
will
that,
be,
but there will be. Yeah, I think in January, starting in January, there can be a lot of stuff online about that.
start?
Yeah, I think right now a lot of us are focused on getting Measure 101 passed, which is to save the Oregon Health Plan and make sure that all people who are eligible get health care, including the great thing now that Oregon has, which is that undocumented children qualify for Oregon Health Plan if their family financially qualifies. And that's so important, and that is at risk, and that's coming up in a special election. A lot of people don't know that, but in January
didn't
it
know
is
that.
one thing on the ballot, and that's this Oregon tax that will enable us to keep the Oregon Health Plan intact and health care for all.
So it's a
it's called
tax?
Measure 101. Yeah, and it's there's a big campaign just getting started this weekend, in fact, to make sure that we pass 101.
So what is it going to be a tax on, or how's that going to work?
I don't know the details of it just yet. I think we'll learn a lot more Sunday. A number of us are going to the kickoff event, but it's not going to cost us money. It's basically to preserve the Oregon Health Plan.
So this this event is when and where? So
Good point. Yeah. So it is Sunday. Start talking,
this
Marco. I'll look it up.
This show does replay on Saturday.
Okay,
too,
let me
so
look
be
it
a
up
good
because
idea
it
to-
is. Yeah, it's a really important thing. I mean, I think these are just, again, the whole issue, or the whole thing. I think that's so important is that migrants, refugees. There's so many interrelated issues that are really make life so difficult for families. And I mean, healthcare is just such a basic one. And so you would say, what's the relationship? Well, the relationship is that a lot of low-income families, immigrant families, are getting services that are potentially going to get cut off, because really the meanness, I think, of this kind of xenophobic, racist administration, it's not just the words they use on Twitter. It's the kinds of laws that they want to pass. I mean, the example, I think, of, I'll come back to healthcare, but the example of DACA, Trump doing what he did, passing it off to Congress, giving Congress the 60 days to come up with a law, and it's all stalled. And
they're not going to be able
is
to
there
do
going to
it.
be a law that's going to be fair and give youth a pathway to citizenship? Not just an administrative rule that they get to sign up again every 2 years, but does it really give a pathway to citizenship? That's one of the things that we're really standing strong for, is a Clean Dream Act, so that it's a legitimate reform in immigration that gives young people a pathway to citizenship, and all immigrant families. and it's not being held ransom by increasing security down at the U.S.-Mexico border, which is what a lot of the proposals from Congress are. Well, we'll give you this, but in return, we're going to build the wall. I mean, that's not
With
immigration.
your tax dollars.
Yeah, that's not immigration reform.
No.
No. So I'll tell you about Measure. I'll look it up here.
The thing that's happening this Sunday.
Sunday, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's Measure 101. Yes.
So we got 15 minutes left. And with things going faster, we have a lot to talk about. There was one thing I was wanting to bring up, but that might put us in a different direction. So I think we need to mainly just talk about, which we already have, obviously ICE and these undocumented workers being hassled or arrested. But there's a lot of other things you folks are doing too. And not you folks so much as the different organizations within the umbrella of the coalition.
The Immigrant Race
I
Coalition.
mean,
Yeah.
helping,
Yeah.
probably helping to feed people and to maybe even find lawyers for them and all that. There's a lot going on with all these different groups.
Oh, it is, and people don't understand the dimension of the situation and what's going on. As Maxine was mentioning before, it's daily that people are being detained, daily, in the daily basis. If people don't remember, from the Obama period and now continues on, going on, is that there has been about 400,000 people being deported every year.
With Obama.
With Obama.
Yeah, more than anybody he did.
He did more than anybody. But that's kind of the standard now. He went to 320,000, the last one or something, a year. That means that there's thousands of people every day being deported. So that means that it's even more people being detained and put in detention. Which, by the way, the detention centers and the immigrant, homeland security system are private businesses that do that. So people, like the people are watching this show,
That
they are
says a
paying
lot.
for it. We are paying with our tax dollars to corporations to make money out of the detention of people. Right?
And a lot of our congressmen and like even think Jeff Sessions, they have investments in some of those companies.
Oh, they do. They have Cheney. Remember Cheney? The
Oh,
vice president of Bush?
yeah.
He was the owner of these Blackwater, these companies that they contracted to take it to Iraq, to all these mercenaries contracted all around the world, etc. But anyway, going back to this, right? So
The corruption's pretty rampant.
oh, it's very rampant. Yeah. And right now with this government, same thing. Everyone pretty much everyone that has high titles, in the government, addressing the environment, addressing business. All of them are the corporations that everyone is opposing to because they're doing the damage on those areas. But they are the ones that are now leading those desks or areas in the government.
Well, like the assault on the Environmental Protection Agency. They put somebody in there who's been wanting to kill it for years.
Absolutely.
Right. So that's exactly what you're saying. It's going from both sides.
The fox guarding the hen house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to this thing, that everything has a connection. So you were saying you do a lot of things, and yes, we do, and we have to do a lot of stuff. So amongst the different things that we are working on, we accompany people, especially like the Interfaith Movement for Immigrant Justice has even a lot of people from churches and congregations that do accompaniment work to immigrants and the families that have court days or they're detained, that they need to go to Tacoma, because in Tacoma is the detention center, to accompany those families and individuals. It's one way of supporting them. But there's a lot of needs in terms of having a lawyer, because if you're in the system, it's not like anyone else. That they don't have the right to have a lawyer. So those are poor families, and in order to start defending themselves, they need to find a lawyer, and lawyers are not cheap, right? So what the coalition is doing in other groups, and the coalition and outside of the coalition, is trying to find resources that help to have legal aid and lawyers that help these families, to help with those cases. There's emergency, people that have been detained, their families, the people that provide for the family, are detained. So what's happening with those families?
I was going to ask
You know?
about that. They take the breadwinner and they have
Absolutely.
the wife and the kids, or they take
Yeah.
the mother and
That
she
is
may be
also
a
the
breadwinner too.
Yeah, exactly, both. Because in our families, you know, everyone works also. And they have to work, everyone have to work. And not just in our families of immigrants or poor families, everyone has to do that. Even the ones that have good situations, they have a good situation because everyone works. So anyway, even more people that, you know, have jobs and that are living in poverty. But anyway, so then there's different programs and organizations that are supporting also with immediate aid, you know, with social services, with this kind of thing, you know.
What communities do for one another.
Oh, the community is providing and helping each other to deal with it. But at the same time, I think that it's important to understand, you know, that all these groups and organizations working on migrant rights, we do understand that migrant rights and the issues of immigrants are connected to everything else. So, you know, something is going on with the workers, you know, that are being exploited in McDonald's. Hey, that issue is
Burgerville.
Or
Burgerville.
yeah.
Right.
Or
We had
New
anything else,
seasons.
right?
New
we had them on
seasons.
last
Seasons.
week, both
Yeah.
of them.
So that is happening, you
We're
know,
with them.
consequences to all the community. Like our issues and what happens to my family and my immigrant community, it's a concern for everyone else in the community.
Absolutely.
So everyone else's issues that are happening in terms of injustice also are our issues. So that's why PIRC is trying to connect, you know. This is the focus of us working on migrant rights, but we are connected to the rest of the social justice and the what's happening around us, and see how we support each other as
Sure.
we can, you know, in terms of building a better place for us to live, you know, where there's more justice in a better world.
Well,
It's also
environmental
connected.
justice,
Yeah.
environmental racism.
All of it,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think you got.
You
I
find
have
something?
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I mention a few events maybe?
Sure.
Would that be good? Okay. So so if folks are interested in the campaign for Measure 101, which is healthcare for all Oregonians, making sure that we protect the most vulnerable people in Oregon, there is going to be a Yes on 101 kickoff this Sunday, December 3rd, from 12 to 4 p.m. at the AF-of-L-CIO office, 3645 Southeast 32nd Avenue in Portland. And you can go to the Yes on 101 Facebook page and
Website, I think, even.
website probably, yeah.
That's
has
down
it,
by
yeah.
Powell, I think.
Yeah,
Right, it is
on
Southeast 32nd.
Powell and 32nd.
32nd, exactly,
Yeah.
right. And then a couple of other PIRC events that
Are they
to
also on
mention.
your website there?
On our Facebook page.
Facebook
there,
page.
On our Facebook page, yeah.
Remember, they're interchangeable.
That's right, they're same thing.
Basically.
Turn on your computer and you
Yeah.
can find it, or go to your phone and you can find it. So PIRC on December 9th, PIRC is sponsoring a caravan to go out to the Dalles to Norcor Prison. So Marco mentioned the Northwest Detention Center, which is the privately run Geo Group prison in Tacoma, which is where the majority of immigrant detainees are taken. However, Norcor Prison, which is a public prison, so 4 counties fund this prison, and you might say, sanctuary law in the state shouldn't be doing this, but they are making up some of their revenue by leasing beds to ICE. So at Norcor Prison, at any time, there are 20 or more immigrant detainees being held in this county jail.
It's in the Dalles.
It's in the
Which
Dalles.
I'd never heard of it.
Yeah, and so it's very concerning. In fact, how it's been used in some cases is, for example, in Tacoma at the Northwest Detention Center when there was a hunger strike by the detainees. They identified and isolated some of the leaders of the hunger strike and took them to Norcor, where from every report we get, the conditions are way worse than even up at Northwest Detention Center, which is bad enough. So there's a group called the Gorge Ice Resistance, which is an amazing group of people from the Dalles and Hood River, and they've formed together They have a vigil at Norcore Prison every single day, 365 days a year. They've been doing it for the last 6 months, and it's
That's a tough
really
one.
amazing.
That's a tough one to do.
They do it. And on the weekends, groups from other parts of the state try to send people to build up the numbers. So December 9th, the vigil is at the Norcore Detention Center, and it's all on our Facebook page. And PIRC is hosting a delegation of us, anybody who wants to, as many as possible from Portland, to go and be at the vigil, which goes from, it's just 12 to 1. So you just drive out to the Dalles from 12 to 1, stand in
So
vigil.
that would be Saturday then.
Saturday
Yeah.
the 9th, yes, yes.
So we're down to like 4 minutes here.
Oh,
I
wow.
mean 2.5 minutes, I
Okay,
should say.
we should hold up the hotline phone number. Or
Right,
something.
let people know. Go ahead
Yeah.
and.
Yeah. So one of the other things that we work at the Immigrant Rights Coalition, and we're gonna come back to another show to explain more.
We're going to have to do that.
But so we have a hotline. I don't know if
I think they can zoom in
they
on
can
that.
zoom
Just
in
hold
a
that
little
up
bit
there,
here.
and he
Uh,
got the
but
automatic
in any
cameras
case,
over
I
here.
will. While they're doing that, we have a hotline for people. It's a 24-hour hotline that is working
I think he's ready for you
with
to.
volunteers. And then I cannot see it. Can you say the number?
Oh yeah, 1-888. There they go. He's got it.
Perfect.
Yeah, as you can see, it's 1-888-622-15110. So this hotline is for there's members in the community. We have a team. That's the other team in the Immigrant Rights Coalition. That is called the Rapid Response Team. And what they do in the team is that we get calls from people that are being affected by ICE. So there's a situation, ICE presence or detention, that they can call us and let us know. So what we can respond to that in a way that, with the support that I already explained. If there's a need of having people doing legal observation just to see that the constitutional rights of people are not being violated, that we can have those people observing and looking at what's going on. We can support with looking for legal aid if it's needed in that situation, if somebody's being detained or
Just
a family.
telling people their rights.
Yeah,
doing
and
it, know your
also
rights.
educating very quickly, what the rights are and what to do and what not to do, so that they understand if they don't know it already. That kind
Sometimes
of thing.
you bring it on yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so this hotline is for that. People call us to report incidents or to look for support if there's something going on. And I encourage people to call us and let us know that.
Let us know what's going on. Well, and thank you both. We got 30 seconds. That was the quickest hour of your life, right?
Went by fast.
It went by fast.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank the crew for making this possible out here. I want to thank you both for coming in. I want to thank Jamie Partridge again.